The village was full of noise that morning. Women banged pots and shouted in anger. Children cried helplessly. And men stood in the narrow mud streets, holding thick wooden sticks. Chaos spread everywhere, as if the entire village had woken up in rage. But their anger was aimed at only one man, Mivalel, the milkman. He stood trembling with his bicycle, his turban crooked, and his buckets hanging from both sides. Villagers pointed fingers at him, their eyes burning with fury. "You are selling us water as milk!" An old farmer screamed, his voice echoing in the street. He raised his stick and struck Mavalo hard. The buckets toppled, and white liquid mixed with water spilled across the muddy ground. Villagers shouted louder, their faith broken. Others joined in. More sticks rained down on Mivalel as he struggled to protect his head. He collapsed onto the dusty road, his face twisted in pain, his buckets lying dented beside him, covered in blood and dirt. Mivalel somehow dragged himself up, climbed onto his wobbly old bicycle, and rode away. His face was swollen, his turban loose, and his hands trembling as the villagers stood behind, spitting curses at him as he rode through the empty rural path. His lips curled into a strange whistle. The tune was faint and broken, but it was his way of hiding pain. The evening sun cast a long shadow of his bicycle across the green fields, and he kept pedaling slowly. Alone, he finally stopped at a small roadside tea stall. The stall, owned by Soon, was built from old wooden planks, with a kettle boiling on the smoky stove. Sanu looked at him with pity. Smivalo sat on a wooden bench, exhausted, his bicycle leaning against the stall. Just then, a big milk truck arrived. Dust flew as it stopped, and Sanu shouted angrily at the driver, accusing him of cheating villagers. The driver leaned out of the truck window in annoyance, while Mavalo quietly watched the quarrel from his bench, saying nothing. Back in the village, a big meeting was called under the ancient banyan tree. Makon Prasad sat proudly on a wooden chair, his fat belly pressing against his kurta. Villagers gathered in large numbers, listening carefully. Behind him, a banner about the government cow scheme hung loosely. The government will give 1 cow to every family, the Sarpanch announced loudly, raising his hand. The villagers clapped and cheered, their faces glowing with hope. Among the crowd, half hidden, stood Mavalo. His bruised face still hurt, but a sly smile appeared. His eyes gleamed with a secret plan as he listened carefully. That very night, he met the Sarpanch in a dark, dimly lit wooden room. A lantern flickered on the table, casting long shadows. The Sarpanch grinned greedily, while Mivalel leaned close, whispering. Money and a thick register lay between them, corruption weaving its net. Weeks later, villagers began returning their cows. The animals were weak, thin, and sickly. Angry villagers dragged them with ropes. Shouting at the Sarpanch, he stood, shocked, pretending innocence, while Mavalo, hidden in the shadows, smirked at the chaos. In reality, Mivalo had been working secretly inside a ruined cowshed at night. He tied cows and injected them, ensuring they stayed weak. The bells around their necks clinked in the darkness as he smiled slyly, watching his plan succeed. With villagers unable to rely on their cows, they once again needed milk. And this time, Mivalel stood proudly near his cart, filled with shining milk cans. Villagers lined up happily to buy, his helpers pouring milk into their glasses. Business bloomed again, but Sundar, a sharp-eyed young man in a blue kurta, grew suspicious. He watched Mivalel from a distance, his serious eyes filled with doubt. One moonlit night, Sundar hid behind a tree near the ruined cowshed. He stayed silent, watching as Mivalel fed the cows secretly, exposing the truth of his scheme. By morning, the news spread like wildfire. Villagers, furious once again, gathered outside Mivalel's small mud house with sticks in their hands. The Sarpanch and Sundar stood in front, leading them. Mivalel stepped out in shock, but before he could defend himself, the mob rushed forward. Sticks struck his body. His buckets broke, and milk spilled onto the ground. He cried in pain, begging for mercy. At last, they pushed him out of the village. He staggered down the lonely, dusty road, his body broken and bruised, while villagers shouted behind, cursing his name. The Sarpanch, however, stood before the crowd, folding his hands with a fake, innocent smile. The villagers clapped, believing him to be pure. But Sundar stood quietly at the back, his sharp eyes still suspicious, knowing the real truth was yet to come.